June 15th. Yesterday there arrived here the conjurer Apfelbaum. On the door of the restaurant there appeared a long affiche informing the esteemed public that the above-named wonderful conjurer, acrobat, chemist, and optician would have the honor to give a superb performance at 8 tonight in the reception hall of the Club of the Nobility, in other words, the restaurant. Admission 2 rubles 50. Everybody intends to go see the wonderful conjurer. Even Princess Ligovskoy, despite the fact that her daughter is ill, took a ticket for herself. Today after dinner I passed under Vera's windows. She was sitting on the balcony alone. A billet fell at my feet. Tonight around 9:30, come to me by the main staircase. My husband has gone to Piatigorsk and will return only tomorrow morning. My footmen and maidservants will not be in the house. I have distributed tickets to all of them, as well as to the princess's servants. I await you. Come without fail. Aha, I thought, at last I am having my way after all. At 8, I went to see the conjurer. The spectators assembled shortly before 9. The performance began. In the back rows of chairs, I recognized the lackeys and the maids of Vera and the princess. Everybody was here. Grushnitsky sat in the front row with his lorgnette. The conjurer turned to him every time he needed a pocket handkerchief, a watch, a ring, and so forth. Grushnitsky does not greet me since some time ago, and tonight, once or twice, he glanced at me rather insolently. All this shall be remembered when the time comes to settle our accounts. Shortly before 10, I rose and left. It was pitch dark outside. Heavy, cold clouds lay on the summits of the surrounding mountains. Only now and then a dying breeze sowed in the crests of the poplars around the restaurant. There was a crowd of people outside the windows. I descended the hill and, turning into the gateway, accelerated my pace. Suddenly it seemed to me that someone was walking behind me. I stopped and looked about me. Nothing could be distinguished in the darkness. However, I took the precaution to go around the house as if I were taking a stroll. As I passed under the windows of the young princess, I again heard steps behind me. A man wrapped up in a military cloak ran past me. This alarmed me. However, I stole up to the porch and swiftly ran up the dark stairs. The door opened. A small hand grasped my hand. "No one saw you?" said Vera in a whisper, pressing herself to me. "No one. Now do you believe that I love you? Oh, for a long time I wavered. For a long time I was tormented. But you make of me all you want." Her heart was beating violently. Her hands were as cold as ice. There began the reproaches of jealousy, plaints. She demanded of me that I confess to her all, saying she would bear with submission my unfaithfulness, since all she desired was my happiness. I did not quite believe this, but I calmed her with vows, promises, and so forth. "So you're not going to marry Mary? You don't love her, and she thinks... Do you know she is madly in love with you, the poor thing?" Around 2 o'clock in the morning, I opened the window and, having tied 2 shawls together, let myself down from the upper balcony to the lower one, holding on to a pillar. In the young princess's room, a light was still burning. Something urged me toward that window. The curtain was not completely drawn, and I could cast a curious glance into the interior of the room. Mary was sitting on her bed, her hands folded in her lap. Her abundant hair was gathered under a nightcap fringed with lace. A large crimson kerchief covered her slender white shoulders. Her small feet hid in variegated Persian slippers. She sat motionless, her head sunk onto her breast. Before her, on a little table, a book was opened, but her eyes, motionless and full of ineffable sadness, seemed for 100th time to skim over the same page, while her thoughts were far away. At this moment, somebody stirred behind a bush. I jumped down from the balcony onto the turf. An invisible hand seized me by the shoulder. "Aha," said a rough voice. "You're caught. I'll teach you to visit young princesses at night." "Hold him tight," cried somebody else, springing from behind a corner. They were Grushnitsky and the captain of dragoons. I struck the latter upon the head with my fist, knocked him down, and dashed into the shrubbery. All the paths of the garden which covered the sloping ground in front of our houses were known to me. "Thieves, help!" they cried. A gunshot rang out. A smoking wad fell almost at my feet. A minute later, I was already in my room. I undressed and lay down. Hardly had my valet locked the door than Grushnitsky and the captain began to knock. "Pechorin, are you asleep? Are you there?" the captain cried. "I am asleep," I answered crossly. "Get up. Thieves, Circassians." "I have a cold," I answered. "I'm afraid to catch a chill." They left. I should not have answered them. They would have gone on looking for me in the garden for another hour. In the meantime, the alarm became terrific. A Cossack came at full speed from the fort. There was a universal stir. They started to look for Circassians in every bush, and naturally found nothing. But many people probably remained firmly convinced that, had the garrison revealed more courage and promptness, at least a score of pillagers would have remained lying about. June 16th. This morning at the well there was nothing but talk about the night raid of the Circassians. Having drunk the prescribed number of glasses of the Narzan water, and having walked the length of the long Linden Avenue 10 times or so, I met Vera's husband, who had just arrived from Piatigorsk. He took my arm and we went to the restaurant to have lunch. He was terribly anxious about his wife. How frightened she was last night, he kept saying, and to think it should have happened precisely during my absence. We sat down to lunch near a door which led to the corner room where a dozen young people were assembled, including Grushnitsky. For a second time, destiny provided me with the chance to overhear a conversation which was to decide his fate. He could not see me, and consequently I could not suspect him of a deliberate purpose. But this only increased his guilt in my eyes. Could it have really been the Circassians? Someone said, did anybody see them? I shall tell you the whole story, answered Grushnitsky. But please do not give me away. This is how it was. Last night, a man, whom I shall not name to you, came to me and told me that shortly before 10, he saw someone steal into the house where the Logovskoys live. I should mention to you that the old princess was here, and the young princess was at home. So he and I betook ourselves under their windows to waylay the lucky fellow. I must confess that I was alarmed, although my interlocutor was very busy with his luncheon. He might have heard things that would be disagreeable to him if Grushnitsky had inadvertently guessed the truth, but being blinded by jealousy, the latter did not suspect it. Well, you see, Grushnitsky went on, we set out, taking a gun with us, loaded with a blank cartridge just to frighten him. Till 2 o'clock we waited in the garden. Finally, God knows where he appeared from. Certainly not from the window, because it was never opened. But presumably he came out through the glass door, which is behind the pillar. Finally, as I say, we saw someone come down from the balcony. How do you like the princess's behavior, eh? Well, I must say those Moscow misses are something. After that, what would you believe? We wanted to seize him, but he freed himself and, like a hare, dashed into the bushes. It was then I took a shot at him. A murmur of incredulity resounded around Grushnitsky. You do not believe me? He continued. I give you my honest and honorable word that all this is the very truth. And in proof, if you wish it, I shall name the gentleman. Tell us who he is, resounded from all sides. Pechorin, answered Grushnitsky. At this moment he raised his eyes. I was standing in the door opposite him. He flushed dreadfully. I went up to him and said slowly and distinctly, I regret very much that I entered after you had already given your word of honor in support of the vilest slander. My presence would have saved you from extra knavery. Grushnitsky jumped up from his seat and was about to flare up. I beg you, I continued in the same tone of voice. I beg you to retract your words at once. You know very well that it is an invention. I do not think that a woman's indifference to your brilliant qualities merits so awful a vengeance. Think well. By affirming your opinion, you lose your right to the name of a gentleman, and you risk your life. Grushnitsky stood before me with lowered eyes and violent agitation, but the struggle between conscience and vanity did not last long. The captain of dragoons, who was sitting next to him, nudged him with his elbow. He started and quickly replied to me without raising his eyes. Sir, when I say something, I mean it, and am ready to repeat it. I am not afraid of your threats, and am prepared for anything. This last you have already proved, I answered coldly, and, taking the captain of dragoons by the arm, I left the room. What is it you want? Asked the captain. You are a friend of Grushnitsky and will probably be his second? The captain bowed with great importance. You have guessed, he answered. I am even obliged to be his second because the insult inflicted upon him refers also to me. I was with him last night, he added, straightening his stooping shoulders. Ah, so it was you that I hit so awkwardly on the head. He turned yellow, turned blue, concealed malevolence, and expressed in his face. He turned yellow, turned blue, concealed malevolence was expressed in his face. I shall have the honor to send you my second today, I added with a very polite bow, pretending not to pay any attention to his rage. On the porch of the restaurant, I came across Vera's husband. Apparently, he had been waiting for me. He grasped my hand with an emotion resembling enthusiasm. "Noble young man," he said with tears in his eyes. "I heard it all. What a scoundrel. What lack of gratitude. Who will want to admit them into a decent house after that? Thank God I have no daughters. But you will be rewarded by her for whom you risk your life. You may rely on my discretion for the time being," he went on. "I have been young myself and have served in the military service. I know one should not interfere in these matters. Goodbye." Poor thing. He rejoices he has no daughters. I went straight to Werner, found him at home, and told him everything, my relations with Vera and with the young princess, and the conversation I had overheard, from which I had learned the intention those gentlemen had of making a fool of me by forcing me to fight a duel with pistols loaded with blanks. But now the matter was going beyond a joke. They, probably, had not expected such an outcome. The doctor agreed to be my second. I gave him some instructions concerning the terms of the duel. He was to insist on the affair remaining as secret as possible because, although I am ready to brave death any time, I am not at all disposed to ruin forever my future career in this world. After this, I went home. An hour later, the doctor returned from his expedition. "There is indeed a plot against you," he said. "I found at Grushnitsky's the captain of dragoons and yet another gentleman, whose name I do not remember." For a moment, I stopped in the vestibule to take off my rubbers. They were making a lot of noise and arguing. "For nothing in the world shall I agree," Grushnitsky was saying. "He insulted me in public. Before that, things were entirely different." "What business is this of yours?" answered the captain. "I take everything upon myself. I was the second in 5 duels, and you may be sure I know how to arrange it. I have planned it all, only please do not interfere. It won't do any harm to scare the fellow, but why expose oneself to danger if one can avoid it?" At this moment I entered. They were suddenly silent. Our negotiations lasted a considerable time. Finally, we decided the matter in the following way. Within 3 miles from here, there is a desolate gorge. They will drive there tomorrow at 4 a.m, and we shall set out half an hour after them. You will shoot at each other at 6 paces. Grushnitsky himself demanded this. The one who is killed is to be put down to the Circassians. Now here are my suspicions. They, that is to say the seconds, have apparently altered somewhat their former plan and want to load, with a bullet, only Grushnitsky's pistol. This slightly resembles murder, but in time of war, and especially Asiatic war, trickery is allowed. However, Grushnitsky seems to be a little nobler than his companions. What do you think? Should we show them that we have found them out? Not for anything on earth, Doctor. Rest assured, I shall not fall in their trap. What then do you want to do? That's my secret. See that you don't get caught. Remember, the distance is 6 paces. Doctor, I expect you tomorrow at 4. The horses will be ready. Goodbye. Till evening I remained at home, locked up in my room. A footman came with an invitation from the old princess. I had him told that I was ill. 2 o'clock in the morning, sleep does not come, yet I ought to have some sleep so that my hand does not shake tomorrow. Anyway, it would be difficult to miss at 6 paces. Ah, Mr. Grushnitsky, your mystification will not come off. We shall exchange parts. It is now I who will search your pale face for signs of secret fear. Why did you designate yourself those fatal 6 paces? You think that I shall present my forehead to you without arguing? But we shall cast lots, and then, what if his luck outweighs mine? What if my star at last betrays me? It would hardly be strange. It has so long served my whims faithfully. There is no more constancy in heaven than there is on earth. Well, what of it? If I am to die, I'll die. The loss to the world will not be large, and anyway, I myself am sufficiently bored. I am like a man who yawns at a ball and does not drive home to sleep only because his carriage is not yet there. But now the carriage is ready. Goodbye. I scan my whole past in memory and involuntarily wonder, why did I live? For what purpose was I born? And yet that purpose must have existed, and my destination must have been a lofty one, for I feel in my soul boundless strength. But I did not divine that destination. I became enticed by the lure of hollow and thankless passions. From their crucible I emerged as hard and cold as iron. but lost forever the ardor of noble yearnings, the best blossom of life. And since then, how many times I have played the part of an axe in the hands of fate, as an executioner's tool. I would fall upon the head of doomed victims, often without malice. I would fall upon the heads of doomed victims, often without malice, always without regret. My love brought happiness to none because I never gave up anything for the sake of those whom I loved. I loved for myself, for my proper pleasure. I merely satisfied a bizarre need of my heart, avidly consuming their sentiments, their tenderness, their joys and sufferings, and never could I have my fill. Thus a man tormented by hunger and fatigue goes to sleep and sees before him rich viands and sparkling wines. He devours with delight the airy gifts of fancy, and he seems to feel relief. But as soon as he awakes, the vision vanishes. He is left with redoubled hunger and despair. And perhaps tomorrow I shall die, and there will not remain on earth a single creature that would have understood me completely. Some deem me worse, others better than I actually am. Some will say he was a good fellow, others will say he was a scoundrel. Both this and that will be false. After this, is it worth the trouble to live? And yet one lives out of curiosity. One keeps expecting something new, absurd and vexatious. It is now a month and a half already that I have been in the fort of N. Maxim Maximitch is out hunting. I am alone. I am sitting at the window. Gray clouds have shut off the mountains to their base. Through the mist, the sun looks like a yellow blur. It is cold. The wind whistles and shakes the shutters. How dull. I am going to continue my journal, which has been interrupted by so many strange events. I read over the last page. How funny. I expected to die. It was impossible. I had not yet drained the cup of sufferings, and I now feel that I still have many years to live. How clearly and sharply the past has crystallized in my memory. Time has not erased one line, one shade. I remember that during the night before the duel, I did not sleep 1 minute. I could not write long. A secret restlessness had taken possession of me. For an hour or so, I paced the room. Then I sat down and opened a novel by Walter Scott, which lay on my table. It was The Scottish Puritans. At first, I read with an effort, but then I lost myself in it, carried away by the magic fantasy. Could it be that in the next world, the Scottish bard is not paid for every glad minute that his book gives?